Ena mana, ena reo, e rau rangatirama, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. As I reflect on the challenges of the past year, including the impact of the pandemic, I think of people who are already living in the most strained of circumstances: refugees, asylum seekers, and internally displaced peoples. In fleeing persecution, millions around the world are cut off from families, homes, culture, and shared knowledge. The pandemic has made the lives of these people even more difficult, as well as drawn many more into dire living conditions. UNESCO was established after World War II in the belief that lasting peace must be founded on dialogue and mutual understanding. UNESCO works to build equality between people by sharing knowledge and enabling access to knowledge. It does this in a range of ways, and often, I admit, in ways that seem to be reasonably dry, such as international agreements, but these can make truly life-changing differences for people. Recognition of education is a huge barrier for many displaced persons. Imagine arriving in a new country and thinking that your major asset was your education, and finding your qualifications were not recognised. The complications this adds to the already challenging tasks of settling into a new country are immense. In 2019, UNESCO adopted the Global Convention on the Recognition of Qualifications Concerning Higher Education. Put simply, the Global Convention asks that people's qualifications are recognised fairly, supporting displaced people to be able to build their lives and contribute to their new country. During the last year, the importance of education and access to it has been starkly highlighted by the pandemic. Without access, education stops, and when education stops, the gaps between people grow wider. UNESCO is one of the many organisations who have been proactive in creating networks and quality resources for educators and families to use during lockdown. Education, learning and developing understanding also comes in the form of sharing stories and experiences, something we've heard a lot used today. It's a very powerful way to, when you hear people's personal stories, to remind you of the sacrifices people have made and of the contribution people have made under very difficult circumstances. Sharing stories and experiences not only helps create empathy between people, it brings the reward of being heard, especially for those who have not been able to express themselves, their values, their beliefs, or their religion freely in their home countries. This basic human right, freedom of expression, is an important value to uphold. This is of central importance to UNESCO and, of course, vital to our democracy. In our busy and very complex world, it's all too easy for the needs of groups of people and individuals to be unnoticed and often unheard. Or as individuals, sometimes we find it hard to know how to help. In recent years, the New Zealand National Commission for UNESCO has supported a number of community groups, provides space for people with different perspectives to share their stories and opportunities for the wider community to hear them. One project the National Commission supported a couple of years ago was Te He Tangata, which is the breath of the people. It was a wonderful and powerful project which aimed to elevate the voices of homeless people and provide an opportunity for them to share their histories and their stories with the wider community. Students from Massey University worked collaboratively with these people to develop their stories and then share them face to face with the wider community. What could be a more powerful way to foster a sense of belonging? The feedback from both of those who shared the stories and those who heard them was very uplifting. Another more recent example of our work in New Zealand was to support a project that we support a number of projects during lockdown. But the Mapura Studios, which works with a special needs community in Auckland, was particularly interesting. They work with, they found during the lockdown that their community felt very isolated, as a lot of people did. And they also found that they were quite fearful about masks. So what they did was they had an activity where they created masks. And the idea here was to see masks as something to enjoy, not to be fearful of. The community felt displaced by the lockdown, and through this activity they were able to join together, and also later, as they shared their creations, more connected again with their communities. It brings to mind a comment I heard from a participant in the Youth Diversity Forum that we organised in late 2019 as a response to the devastating terrorist attacks on mosques in Christchurch. After a weekend where about 100 young people gathered together, a young participant told me that she had never, before that weekend, had the opportunity to speak with someone who identified as Muslim. She said she felt so lucky to have had the opportunity to learn through face-to-face conversations. These young leaders' vision for Aotearoa is that everyone will accept, respect and celebrate each other's differences within thriving communities where all people can find a sense of belonging and be able to contribute to the shaping of the future of our country. On that note, and just to finish, and to add actually to all the other speakers, and in this case particularly to the Mayor who made this comment about one of the contributions made by one of my predecessors as a chair of UNESCO National Commission was Fred Turnovsky. And he came as a refugee to New Zealand in 1940 and went on to lead the National Commission in the 1970s. He represented New Zealand on the executive board and was at the forefront of the efforts to recognise New Zealand's place in the Pacific by moving us out of the Europe regional grouping, which I find amazing that we were ever in the Europe regional grouping, into the Asia-Pacific grouping. This has had a significant impact on our work today, and actually probably the work of many of us and many groups that we see ourselves as a part of the Pacific and the Pacific region, and we feel a responsibility in that area as well. However people are displaced within our society or across borders, we all have a responsibility to notice, to listen and to respond, and to play our part in creating communities where everyone can find a place, feel safe, know they belong, and where they have the opportunities to contribute to their community, their country, and their world. Thank you very much.